The chandeliers of the Palazzo Venturi cast 10,000 fragments of light across the grand ballroom, each crystal teardrop worth more than most people earned in a year. 500 guests moved through the space in rivers of silk and diamonds, their laughter calculated, their smiles rehearsed. But every woman in that room, every single one, had her attention fixed on the entrance. 5 of them stood closest to the door. The socialite in gold, her blonde hair cascading like liquid honey. The politician's daughter, spine rigid, gaze surgical. The supermodel who had graced 17 magazine covers this year alone. The business heiress who had inherited an empire and doubled it. The actress whose face had launched a billion-dollar franchise. They had positioned themselves with military precision. They were ready, and then Don Marciano Tatti walked in and looked at none of them. His dark eyes swept the room with the bored patience of a man who owned everything he surveyed. The Italian script tattooed along his neck caught the chandelier light, the ink dark against his olive skin. His tailored black suit hung from shoulders broad enough to fill doorways. He moved like silence itself, and the crowd parted for him like water. The 5 women held their breath. He walked past every single one of them. His gaze landed on the waitress. Hello, beautiful listeners. Before we continue this story, I want to thank you for being here. Your support means everything. If you enjoy this journey, please like, share, and subscribe. Isabella Terenzi felt his stare before she saw him. She was balancing a silver tray of champagne flutes, her dark brown hair pulled back in a neat twist, loose strands escaping to frame her face. Her uniform was simple, black dress, white apron, sensible shoes. She wore no jewelry, no makeup beyond a touch of mascara. She was invisible by design. But when she looked up, she found the most dangerous man in Rome watching her like she was the only person in the room. The tray wobbled. She steadied it, steadied herself. His eyes held hers for 3 seconds. 4, 5. Then he smiled, just barely, just enough for her to see, and continued walking toward the private section roped off for the Tatti family. Isabella exhaled. Her hands were shaking. Behind her, one of the other waitresses grabbed her arm. Did Don Tatti just look at you? No, Isabella said automatically. Of course not. But she could still feel his gaze like a brand on her skin. The gala continued around her, oblivious to the shift that had just occurred. Powerful men conducted business in corners. Their wives compared jewelry and enemies. The 5 elite women who had positioned themselves for Marciano's attention were now regrouping, their smiles frozen, their eyes sharp with something that looked like hatred. Isabella didn't notice any of it. She was too busy trying to remember how to breathe. Later that evening, the crowd had thinned enough for the serving staff to take rotations. Isabella slipped through a service corridor toward the kitchen, her feet aching, her mind still turning over that moment of eye contact. She had heard stories about Don Marciano Tatti. Everyone in Rome had. He controlled the ports, the politicians, the police. His family had run the city's underworld for 4 generations. Men who crossed him disappeared. Women who caught his attention usually wished they hadn't. And yet, there had been something in his eyes that didn't match the rumors. Something almost like recognition, though she had never met him before in her life. She pushed through the kitchen doors and nearly collided with a wall of black fabric. The wall was a man. He was tall, taller than anyone she had ever stood close to, with slicked back dark hair and a jawline that could cut glass. The tattoos on his knuckles spelled out something in Italian she couldn't read. The ones on his forearm, visible where his sleeves were rolled back, depicted a serpent wrapped around a crown. Don Marciano Tatti looked down at her with those cold, unreadable eyes. "You nearly spilled champagne earlier," he said. His voice was low, quiet. It didn't need to be loud. Isabella's heart slammed against her ribs. "I didn't spill anything." "No," he agreed. "You didn't. He studied her face like he was memorizing it. The shape of her cheekbones, the depth of her brown eyes, the way she didn't look away, even though every instinct screamed at her to run. "What's your name?" he asked. "Isabella." "Isabella what?" "Terenzi." He repeated it softly, like he was testing how it felt in his mouth. "Isabella Terenzi." Then he stepped aside, clearing her path to the kitchen, and she realized he had been blocking the door deliberately, waiting for her. "You should eat something," he said. "You've been serving for 4 hours without a break." She stared at him. "How do you know that?" Something flickered in his expression. Amusement, maybe, or something darker. "Go eat, Isabella Terenzi." He walked away before she could respond, disappearing back into the glittering world of the ballroom like he had never been in the service corridor at all. Isabella stood frozen for a long moment. Then she pushed into the kitchen, grabbed a bread roll she didn't taste, and spent the next hour trying to convince herself she had imagined the entire encounter. The gala was scheduled to end at midnight, but the powerful never followed schedules. By 2 in the morning, Isabella's feet had gone numb and the remaining guests showed no signs of leaving. She was stationed near the bar now, collecting empty glasses, staying out of sight. The 5 women who had positioned themselves for Don Taddy's attention had long since dispersed into different strategies. The socialite had cornered him near the fountain terrace and was laughing at something he hadn't said. The politician's daughter was deep in conversation with his business associate, clearly trying to work an angle. The model had given up entirely and was flirting with a lesser member of the syndicate. The heiress was watching from across the room, calculating her next move. The actress had positioned herself near the exit, timing her departure for maximum impact. None of them had succeeded. Isabella watched the socialite's gold dress catch the light as she leaned closer to Marciano, her hand touching his forearm, her smile practiced and perfect. Marciano's expression didn't change. He said something brief, dismissive. The socialite's smile faltered. Then his eyes lifted, over her head, past her shoulder, directly to the bar where Isabella stood frozen with an empty champagne flute in her hand. Their gazes locked. The socialite turned to see what he was looking at. Her face went through a rapid series of emotions. Confusion, disbelief, fury. Isabella looked away first this time, her cheeks burning. When she glanced back, Marciano was still watching her. He wasn't smiling anymore. The gala ended at 3 in the morning. Isabella collected her pay envelope from the catering manager, €200 for 8 hours of work, and slipped out the service entrance into the cold Roman night. The Palazzo Venturi sat on a hill overlooking the city. From the service entrance, she could see Rome sprawled below like a carpet of lights, the Colosseum a shadow against the horizon. She took a deep breath of clean air. "You're walking home?" The voice came from behind her. Low, quiet, familiar. Isabella turned. Don Marciano Taddy stood in the shadows of the service corridor, his suit jacket unbuttoned, his forearm tattoos visible in the distant light spilling from a window. He was leaning against the wall like he had been waiting there for hours. Maybe he had. "I take the bus," she said. "The buses don't run at 3 in the morning." She shrugged. "Then I walk." "Through Testaccio?" "Trastevere." His voice hardened slightly. "At this hour?" "I've done it before." He pushed off the wall and moved toward her. Not fast, not threatening, but with a deliberate purpose that made her pulse quicken. "My driver will take you home." "No, thank you." It wasn't a question. Isabella lifted her chin. "I don't get in cars with strangers." Something shifted in his expression. The coldness cracked, just for a moment, revealing something that looked almost like respect. "I'm not a stranger," he said. "You know exactly who I am." "Yes," she agreed. "That's why I don't get in your car." He stopped 3 feet away from her, Close enough that she could smell his cologne. Dark, expensive, subtle. Close enough that she could see the tattoo on his neck clearly now. Italian script that read La morte è una promessa. Death is a promise. You're not afraid of me, he said quietly. It wasn't a question. I'm terrified of you, Isabella corrected. I'm just not going to let that make my decisions. Silence stretched between them. Then Marciano laughed. A low, unexpected sound that transformed his face entirely. For one brief moment he looked almost young, almost human. Get in the car, Isabella Terenzi. No, I'll have my driver follow you then, at a distance, to make sure you get home safely. That's not necessary. It's not negotiable. She stared at him. He stared back. Neither of them moved. Finally, Isabella sighed. Fine, but the car stays a block behind me. 200 meters. 300. The corner of his mouth twitched. Deal. He pulled out his phone, sent a brief text, and a moment later a black Mercedes appeared from somewhere in the palazzo's parking structure. Isabella started walking. True to his word, the car stayed exactly 300 meters behind her the entire way. The apartment Isabella shared with her younger sister was in Testaccio, on the 4th floor of a building that had been crumbling since before she was born. The elevator hadn't worked in 6 years. The hot water was temperamental. The walls were thin enough to hear every argument, every celebration, every mundane detail of their neighbors' lives. It was home. She climbed the stairs quietly, let herself in, and found her sister Julia asleep on the couch with a textbook open on her chest. Isabella moved the textbook gently, covered Julia with a blanket, stood in the dark living room and thought about a man with cold eyes and warm laughter who had sent a car to follow her home. She didn't sleep that night. The catering company called her 4 days later with another job, another gala, another palazzo, another night of invisible labor in rooms full of people who would never know her name. Isabella almost said no, but the rent was due and Julia's tuition payment was coming up, and 200 euros was 200 euros. She said yes. The Palazzo Corsetti was smaller than the Venturi but no less opulent. Old money, old art, old scandals hidden behind old walls. Isabella wore the same uniform, carried the same silver tray, performed the same invisible dance through crowds of silk and secrets. She didn't expect to see him there. She certainly didn't expect him to be watching the door when she walked in. Don Marciano Taddi stood near the center of the room, surrounded by men who looked equally dangerous and women who looked equally expensive. But his attention wasn't on them. His attention was on the service entrance, like he had been waiting for something, someone. When his eyes found her, something in his expression shifted, settled, like he had been holding his breath until this moment. Isabella looked away, collected her tray from the kitchen, began her circuit through the room. She made it 20 minutes before he appeared beside her. "You're here," he said. She didn't look at him. "I work for the catering company." "I know. I requested them specifically." That made her stop, made her turn. He was watching her with that same unreadable expression. His tattoos dark against his skin. His presence a gravity well that seemed to bend the room around him. "You requested the catering company," she repeated. "I made a donation to the Corsetti Foundation. They allowed me to suggest vendors." "That's stalking." He tilted his head. "Perhaps. I was going to say excessive. Those are often the same thing in my experience." A guest brushed past them, and Isabella remembered where she was, who he was, who was watching. "I should get back to work," she said. "When do you take your break?" "I don't. Everyone takes breaks. Not everyone needs to pay their sister's university tuition." Something flickered in his eyes. She couldn't read what. 10 o'clock, he said. "There's a balcony off the east corridor. The door locks from inside. I'm not meeting you. You don't have to meet me, he said. But there will be food there. Real food, not bread rolls. He walked away before she could respond. Isabella spent the next 2 hours trying not to think about a locked balcony with real food. At 10:15, she found herself standing at the east corridor. At 10:17, she opened the door. The balcony was small and private, overlooking a garden that smelled of jasmine. A table had been set with 2 chairs, 2 plates, 2 glasses of wine. The food was simple but beautiful. Fresh bread, prosciutto, mozzarella, olives, roasted vegetables. Don Marciano Taddy sat in one of the chairs, his jacket removed, his shirt sleeves rolled to his elbows, his forearm tattoos fully visible. He didn't look surprised to see her. "You came," he said. "I was hungry." "Sit." She sat. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Isabella ate because she was genuinely hungry and the food was genuinely good. Marciano watched her with an expression she still couldn't decipher. "Why are you doing this?" she finally asked. "Doing what?" "This." She gestured at the table, the balcony, him. "Following me, showing up at events where I work, feeding me, because you interest me. I'm a waitress. I know. There are 5 women in that ballroom who would kill for your attention. Literally, probably. I know. So why me?" He considered the question, poured her more wine, set the bottle down with careful precision. "Because when I walked into the Venturi Gala," he said slowly, "every woman in that room looked at me like I was something to be acquired, a prize, a stepping stone, a weapon to be wielded against their enemies." He leaned forward, his eyes locked on hers. "You looked at me like I was just a man." Isabella's heart was beating too fast. "You're not just a man." "No," he agreed. "I'm not. But for a moment, in your eyes, I was." He reached across the table. His fingers brushed hers. The touch was light, barely there, but it sent electricity through her entire body. "I've spent 36 years being a symbol," he said quietly. "A name, a legacy, a threat. No one has ever looked at me and seen something other than what I represent." His thumb traced a small circle on her wrist. "You did. I didn't know who you were at first. But when you found out, you still looked at me the same way." Isabella swallowed. "Maybe I'm just stupid." "No." His voice was soft, certain. "You're just honest. And honest women don't survive long in my world." "Is that a threat?" "It's an observation." She should pull her hand away. She should stand up, walk back inside, finish her shift, go home, never speak to him again. She didn't move. "What do you want from me?" she whispered. "I don't know yet." "That's not reassuring." "I'm not a reassuring man." He released her hand, leaned back. The moment broke. "Eat," he said. "Your break is almost over." She ate. She didn't taste anything. When she returned to the ballroom, her face carefully neutral, her hands no longer shaking, she felt eyes on her from every direction. The socialite in gold was there again. So was the actress. Both of them watched Isabella with expressions that had moved beyond jealousy into something darker, something dangerous. The weeks that followed developed a pattern. Isabella worked gala after gala. The catering company had never been so busy, though she suspected the reasons had nothing to do with their service quality and everything to do with a certain Mafia boss's sudden interest in charity events. At every gala, Marciano appeared. At every gala, he watched her. At every gala, they found moments, brief, stolen, charged, to speak. He learned that she was 24 years old, that her mother had died when she was 16, that her father had left long before that she had raised Julia alone, working 3 jobs while finishing high school, then working 3 more while Julia went to university. She learned that he was 38. that he had inherited his position from his father at 22, that he had killed his first man at 19, though he didn't tell her that directly. She read it in the silence when she asked about his past. She learned that he spoke 4 languages fluently, that he read poetry in the original Italian, that he had a sister who had left the family and a brother who had died young and a mother who still lived in the family compound but never spoke to him. She learned that beneath the cold exterior he burned, and she learned that she was starting to burn too. The 5th gala was at the Palazzo Barberini. Isabella was serving champagne near the grand staircase when a man she didn't recognize approached her with a smile that set her teeth on edge. "You're Isabella, aren't you?" He was handsome in a generic way, with slicked hair and a suit that cost more than her annual rent. "I've heard so much about you. I'm sorry, have we met?" "Not yet." He moved closer. Too close. "I'm Enzo. Enzo Cavalli." The name meant nothing to her, but the way he said it suggested it should. "I'm working," she said. "If you'll excuse me." The Tatty Don's new fixation. Enzo's smile sharpened. "That's what they're calling you, you know, in certain circles." Isabella's blood went cold. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't you?" He reached out and touched her arm. Marciano Tatti has attended more social events in the past month than in the previous 2 years combined. Always watching the service staff. Always leaving early when you do. People notice these things. There's nothing to notice. There's everything to notice. His grip on her arm tightened. The Tatti syndicate and the Cavalli family have been rivals for decades. Anything that distracts him is interesting to us. Isabella tried to pull away. He didn't let go. "You're hurting me. I'm barely touching you. Let go. Make me." The words had barely left his mouth when a hand appeared on his shoulder. The hand had tattooed knuckles. "I believe," Don Marciano Tatti said quietly. "The lady asked you to release her." Enzo's face went pale, then red, then a careful neutral. "Marciano, I know what you were just." Marciano's voice hadn't raised at all, but something in it made Enzo's hand drop from Isabella's arm instantly. "I also know what your family would say if they learned you had touched something of mine." Something of mine. The words landed like stones. "She's not," Enzo started. "Isn't she?" Silence. The entire room had gone quiet. Everyone was watching. The socialite, the actress, the heiress, the model, the politician's daughter. Hundreds of Roman elite, witnessing Don Marciano Tatti claim a waitress in public. Enzo's jaw clenched. "This isn't over." "Yes," Marciano said. "It is." He stepped forward, forcing Enzo to step back, and then continued stepping forward until Enzo had no choice but to retreat entirely or be pushed. He retreated. Marciano turned to Isabella. "Are you hurt?" "No." Her voice came out smaller than she wanted. "I'm fine." "You're shaking." She looked down at her hands. He was right. "Come with me." "I'm working." "You're done working tonight." "I can't just leave." "Isabella." His voice dropped, softened. "Come with me, please." The please undid her. She followed him through the crowd, aware of every eye on them, every whisper starting behind them. He led her through a corridor, then another, then out a side door into a courtyard lit by string lights and moonlight. When they were alone, he turned to face her. "I apologize." She blinked. "For what?" "For making you a target." His jaw was tight. Enzo Cavalli is a fool, but he's a connected fool. His family will have heard about tonight within the hour. "Heard what?" "That you defended a waitress from harassment. That I claimed a woman publicly." His eyes held hers. "In front of half of Rome's power structure. That makes you valuable. And valuable things get stolen." "I'm not a thing. I know that." He moved closer. "But they don't." She should be afraid. She should be running. She should be calling Julia and telling her to pack a bag and catch the first train to anywhere. Instead, she asked, "Did you mean it?" "Mean what?" "When you said I was yours." Silence. Marciano raised his hand. Slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. His fingers touched her cheek, traced her jawline, came to rest against the pulse point in her neck. "Yes," he said. "I meant it. We've had 5 conversations. 6. But who's counting? This is insane." "Yes. You don't even know me." "I know enough." "What do you know?" He leaned closer, his forehead nearly touching hers, his breath warm on her lips. "I know that you work 16-hour days so your sister can become a doctor. I know that you haven't bought yourself new shoes in 3 years even though the ones you wear are falling apart. I know that you send money to your mother's grave maintenance fund even though you can barely afford food." His thumb brushed her cheekbone. "I know that you look at me without wanting anything except to be seen. I know that you make me feel like a person instead of a position. I know that I have thought about you every single day since the Venturi Gala, and I know that I am not a man who thinks about anyone." Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it. "This can't work," she whispered. "Probably not. I'm a waitress. I don't care. Your world would eat me alive. I wouldn't let it. You can't protect me from everything. Watch me." Then his mouth was on hers, and she stopped arguing. The kiss was devastating. He kissed her like he was memorizing her, like she was oxygen and he had been drowning. His hand cradled the back of her head, while his other arm wrapped around her waist, pulling her against him, and she could feel every hard line of his body through the thin fabric of her uniform. She kissed him back just as desperately. Her fingers found his hair, destroying its careful styling. Her body pressed into his like it knew something her mind was still denying. When they finally broke apart, both of them breathing hard, she realized she had never been kissed like that in her entire life. And she realized, with terrifying clarity, that she would never be satisfied with anything less again. "Isabella," he breathed against her lips. "This is a mistake. The best one I've ever made. Marciano, say my name again. This is serious. Say it. Marciano." He kissed her again. When they finally separated, he kept her close, his arms still around her, his chin resting on the top of her head. "Come home with me tonight." "I can't." "Tomorrow, then." "I have to work tomorrow." "Then quit." She laughed. Actually laughed. At the absurdity of it. "I can't quit working. I have bills, responsibilities, a life that exists outside of whatever this is." "Then let me help you." "Absolutely not." "Why not?" "Because I don't want your money. I don't want your protection. I don't want anything you can buy." He pulled back enough to look at her face. "What do you want?" The question hung in the air. Isabella thought about her cramped apartment, her aching feet, her exhausted sister, her dead mother and absent father, an endless parade of jobs that never quite added up to enough. She thought about the way this man looked at her like she was precious, like she mattered, like she was something worth fighting for. "I want to be seen," she finally said. "Not as a conquest, not as a possession, not as a weapon against your enemies. Just seen." Marciano's expression shifted. Something vulnerable cracked through the cold exterior. "I see you," he said quietly. "I've seen you from the moment you nearly dropped that champagne tray. You're the only real thing I've encountered in years. You don't know me. Then let me learn." She shouldn't. She absolutely shouldn't. But she looked into his eyes, cold on the surface, burning underneath, and she said, "Okay." The next 3 weeks were a careful dance. Marciano respected her boundaries. He didn't try to buy her. He didn't try to install her in some apartment he owned. He didn't try to remove her from her life or reshape it to fit his. Instead, he met her in hers. He showed up at her apartment building in a normal car, not the Mercedes. He wore simple clothes, still expensive but not ostentatiously so. His tattoos were always visible, impossible to hide, but he made no effort to intimidate or impress. He took her to dinner at restaurants she could have afforded herself. He walked her through neighborhoods he had probably never visited before. He sat on park benches and talked about poetry and politics and the particular loneliness of being a man who everyone feared and no one knew. Julia caught him waiting outside the building once and nearly had a heart attack. "That's Don Taddy," she hissed at Isabella later. "The Don Taddy, the one they write about in the newspapers. The one who supposedly killed 17 men last year. The newspapers exaggerate. Isabella, I know what he is." "Then what are you doing?" Isabella didn't have an answer for that. What she was doing was falling. Helplessly, irrationally, against every instinct she possessed. Every moment she spent with Marciano peeled back another layer of the man beneath the dawn. She learned that he loved old films and terrible coffee. She learned that he had a scar on his left shoulder from a knife fight when he was 17. She learned that he still had nightmares about his brother's death. She learned that he was capable of extraordinary tenderness. And she learned that beneath all of it, he was still exactly what everyone said he was. A killer, a crime lord, a man who would burn the world down if it served his purposes. She fell anyway. One evening, a month after the Barberini incident, Isabella's phone rang while she was walking home from a shift. The voice on the other end was unfamiliar. "Isabella Terenzi? Who is this?" "A friend. I don't have friends who call from blocked numbers." "Then consider me an interested party." The voice was female, cultured, cold. "I'm calling to warn you." Isabella's steps slowed. "Warn me about what?" "About what happens to women who get too close to Marciano Taddy." "Who is this?" His last interest was a woman named Sofia Marchetti. She was a teacher. Lovely woman. Very naive. Isabella's blood ran cold. What happened to her? She got too close. Started asking questions. Started seeing things she shouldn't have seen. A pause. "They found her body in the Tiber 3 years ago." "You're lying." "Am I?" "Ask him. Ask Marciano about Sofia. See if he denies it." The line went dead. Isabella stood on the sidewalk, phone in hand, heart pounding. She should run. She should pack a bag and take Julia and disappear. But she thought about Marciano's eyes when he talked about his brother. She thought about his voice when he said her name. She thought about the way he held her like she was something precious, something breakable, something he was afraid to lose. She called him instead. "Isabella." His voice warmed when he answered. "I was just thinking about you." Who was Sofia Marchetti? Silence. Long, heavy silence. "Who told you that name?" "Someone called me. Said she was your last interest. Said they found her body in the river." More silence. "Marciano, where are you? Answer me." "Isabella, where are you?" The urgency in his voice made her stomach drop. "Walking home. I'm near the..." "Go somewhere public. Right now. Don't go to your apartment." "What? Why?" "Someone gave you that name to frighten you. That means someone is watching you. Someone who knows things they shouldn't know." His voice had gone cold. Not the controlled cold she was used to, but something harder, sharper. "I'm sending my people. Stay in public until they reach you." "Marciano, who was she?" "I'll explain everything. I swear to you. But right now I need you to trust me." She should hang up. She should run. "Okay," she said. "Okay. There's a cafe 2 blocks from here. Go there. Don't talk to anyone. My men will be there in 10 minutes. Marciano." I'll tell you everything, Isabella. Everything. Just stay safe. The line went dead. Isabella walked to the cafe on shaking legs. She ordered a coffee she didn't taste. And exactly 9 minutes later, 3 men in dark suits appeared outside the window. One of them nodded at her through the glass. She was safe, but she wasn't sure anymore if she wanted to be. Marciano's men took her to a house she had never seen before. A villa outside the city, surrounded by walls and guards and the kind of security that made her stomach turn. This was his real life, not the park benches and simple dinners. He was waiting for her inside. Isabella. He reached for her. She stepped back. His face flickered with something she couldn't name. Tell me about Sophia, she said. He lowered his hand, nodded, gestured toward a sitting room. They sat across from each other. The distance felt like miles. Sophia Marchetti was a teacher, he began quietly. I met her at a charity event 5 years ago. She was kind, genuine, like you. You dated her? I pursued her for 3 months. She resisted at first, but eventually, he trailed off. Eventually, she stopped resisting. Isabella's chest ached. What happened? I was careless. I let my interest in her become known. The Cavalli family, Enzo's family, decided she would make excellent leverage. His hands clenched on his knees. They took her from her apartment one night, held her for 3 days. By the time my people found her, he stopped, swallowed. It was too late. They killed her. Yes, because of you. Yes. The word hung in the air, heavy with grief and guilt. And you didn't think to tell me this before I got involved with you? I should have. His voice cracked. I know I should have. But when I looked at you, I saw something I hadn't seen in years. Something clean, untouched by my world. And I was selfish enough to want it. To want me. Yes. Isabella stood up. Her legs were shaking. Her whole body was shaking. Someone knows about me now. Someone is making threats. I will protect you. Like you protected her? The words were cruel. She knew they were cruel. But she saw them land anyway. Saw the way Marciano's face went pale. Saw the way his hands clenched tighter. That's fair, he said quietly. That's more than fair. I need to leave. Isabella. I need to think. He stood up, moved toward her, stopped when she held up her hand. Please, she said. Please don't. At least let my people take you somewhere safe. Your apartment isn't. I'll go to a hotel. Let me pay for it. No. Isabella. I said no. He closed his eyes. When he opened them again, they were wet. I never meant to hurt you, he said. I never meant to put you in danger. I wanted you. I wanted something that was mine that wasn't covered in blood. Everything you touch turns to blood. I know. She walked toward the door. His voice stopped her. Isabella. She didn't turn around. I love you. She walked out anyway. The next week was the longest of her life. Isabella stayed in a cheap hotel near the train station, paying for it with the last of her savings. Julia called 17 times. Marciano called 43. She answered neither. She went back to work. The catering company had other events, other galas, other invisible labor, and she tried to pretend that her heart wasn't breaking. But every night, she lay in her cheap hotel bed and thought about him, about his eyes when he looked at her, about his voice when he said her name, about the way he had confessed his darkest failure without flinching and then let her walk away, about the fact that he had said he loved her, and about the fact that she loved him too. On the 7th day, her hotel room door opened. She hadn't heard anyone pick the lock, but she knew before she turned around exactly who it would be. How did you find me? She asked. I always knew where you were, Marciano said quietly. I've had people watching the hotel since the night you left. To protect me. Yes. She turned. He looked terrible. There were shadows under his eyes. His suit was rumpled. His tattoos stood out starkly against skin that had gone pale from sleepless nights. You shouldn't be here, she said. I know. I told you I needed time. I know that too. He stepped closer. But something has changed. What? The Cavallis are moving. They've identified you as leverage against me. Real leverage now, not just speculation. Her blood went cold. They're going to try to take you. Tonight, probably. Tomorrow at the latest. Then I'll leave the city. They'll find you. They have resources everywhere. Then what do I do? He moved closer still. Close enough to touch. Come with me. Let me protect you. You couldn't protect Sophia. I've learned from Sophia. His voice broke on the name. I've spent 3 years building better security, better intelligence, better everything, because I swore I would never let that happen again. And what about my life? My sister? My job? Julia will be protected too. I'll move her somewhere safe. Give her the resources to finish her education anywhere she wants. And your job? He paused. Isabella, you don't have to work 3 shifts just to survive. You don't have to destroy your body for 200 euros a night. Let me give you a life where you can breathe. I don't want to be kept. That's not what I'm offering. Then what are you offering? He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Isabella's heart stopped. I'm offering you partnership, he said quietly. Not ownership. Not possession. Partnership. You would have equal say in everything. Equal power. Equal respect. We've known each other for 6 weeks. I know. This is insane. I know that too. He opened the box. The ring inside was simple. Beautiful. A single diamond on a platinum band. No larger than what she might have bought for herself if she had ever been able to afford it. I had it made to fit you, he said. No giant stone. Nothing ostentatious. Just honest. Tears were streaming down her face. I'm a waitress, she whispered. You're the woman I love. Your world will never accept me. My world will bow to you or it will burn. Those are the only options I'm offering. She looked at the ring, at the man holding it, at the future that was terrifying and impossible and everything she had never dared to dream. And she said nothing. The silence stretched between them like a wire pulled taut. Marciano's hand remained steady. The ring box open, the diamond catching the dim light of the cheap hotel room. His eyes never left her face. Isabella's tears kept falling. I can't, she finally whispered. Something in his expression fractured. Just slightly, just enough for her to see. Can't or won't. Does it matter? It matters to me. She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the stuffy room. If I say yes, I become a target forever. Not just now, forever. Every enemy you have becomes my enemy. Every threat against you becomes a threat against me. Yes. And if we have children someday, they would be protected, guarded, loved. They would be prisoners. He flinched, actually flinched. Isabella, I watched my mother die slowly, she said, her voice cracking. Cancer. 3 years of hospitals and treatments and hope that kept getting smaller. And do you know what she told me at the end? He shook his head. She told me to choose a life that was mine. Not my father's. He left when things got hard. Not anyone else's. Mine. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. If I marry you, my life stops being mine. It becomes yours. Yours and your families and your enemies and everyone else who wants a piece of Don Marciano Taddy. That's not. It is. And you know it is. He closed the ring box slowly. The click was louder than it should have been. "So this is goodbye," he said quietly. "I don't know what this is. It feels like goodbye." She wanted to reach for him, wanted to take back everything she had just said, wanted to grab that ring and put it on her finger and damn the consequences. But she thought about Sofia Marchetti's body in the Tiber. She thought about Julia, who still had her whole life ahead of her. She thought about the woman her mother had wanted her to become. "I need more time," she said. "We don't have time. The Cavallis. Then protect me without owning me. You said you have better security now. Better intelligence. Use it. Keep me safe while I figure out what I want." "And if what you want isn't me?" The question broke something inside her. "Then at least I'll know," she whispered. "At least I'll have chosen." Marciano stood there for a long moment, the ring box still in his hand, his face a mask of controlled devastation. Then he nodded. "Okay," he said. "Okay, I'll protect you. No strings, no expectations. Just protection." "Thank you." "Don't thank me." His voice was rough. "I'd burn the world down to keep you safe, Isabella. That's not generosity. That's obsession." He turned and walked toward the door, stopped with his hand on the handle. "The ring stays with me," he said without turning around. "In case you change your mind." Then he was gone. Isabella collapsed onto the bed and sobbed until she couldn't breathe. The protection Marciano promised materialized immediately. Within an hour of his departure, 2 women arrived at her hotel room. They were professional, courteous, and clearly lethal. They introduced themselves as Elena and Marta, and they would be her shadows until further notice. "We're not here to control you," Elena explained, "just to keep you alive. What if I want to go somewhere? Then we go with you. What if I want privacy? We wait outside, but we never leave." It should have felt like imprisonment. Instead, it felt like safety. The next morning, Isabella returned to work. Elena and Marta followed at a discreet distance, blending into crowds, watching exits, doing whatever it was that professional bodyguards did. The other servers noticed and whispered, but no one asked questions directly. The gala that night was at the Palazzo Farnese, the French embassy technically, but rented for private events when the price was right. Isabella circulated with her tray, invisible as always, trying not to think about the last time she had worked a gala, trying not to think about him. She failed. Every dark-haired man in a suit made her heart jump. Every low voice made her turn. Every shadow in her peripheral vision could have been him. But Marciano didn't appear. She should have been relieved. She was devastated. The night passed in a blur of champagne and forced smiles. When her shift ended at 1 in the morning, Elena and Marta escorted her to a waiting car. Not the Mercedes, but something equally expensive and armored. "Where are we going?" Isabella asked. "Your apartment," Elena said. "Don Taddy has had it secured. New locks, new windows, alarm system. Your sister has been moved to a safe location until the threat passes." "Julia's gone?" "She's safe. You can call her tomorrow." Isabella should have argued, should have demanded to know where her sister was, should have raged against the high-handed way Marciano was rearranging her life. But she was tired, so tired. She let them take her home. The apartment looked the same but felt different. There were small cameras in the corners now. Elena pointed them out apologetically, and the windows had been reinforced with something that looked like bulletproof glass. Her life had become a fortress. She wondered if Sofia Marchetti's apartment had looked like this before the Cavallis took her. She wondered if it would matter. The next 3 days passed in a strange limbo. Isabella worked her shifts, shadowed by Elena and Marta. She talked to Julia on a secure phone line, reassuring her sister that everything was fine while carefully not explaining why she was in hiding. She ate food that was delivered by people she didn't know and slept in a bed that no longer felt like hers. She didn't hear from Marciano. Not a call. Not a message. Not even a distant sighting at one of the events she worked. He was keeping his promise. Protecting her without owning her. She had never felt more alone in her life. On the fourth night, the Cavallis made their move. Isabella was walking from the service entrance of the Palazzo Corsetti, back to the same venue where everything had started to spiral, when Elena's hand closed on her arm. Stop! Isabella stopped. Marta had her hand inside her jacket, fingers wrapped around something Isabella couldn't see but could guess at. What's wrong? The car's been moved. What? Our car. It was parked there. Elena pointed to an empty space. Now it's gone. Isabella's blood ran cold. What do? We go back inside. Now. They turned toward the service entrance. 3 men were blocking it. They weren't dressed like guests. They weren't dressed like staff. They were dressed like soldiers. Black tactical gear, hard faces, hands that were definitely holding weapons under their jackets. Miss Terenzi, one of them said, you need to come with us. She's not going anywhere with you, Elena said. I'm afraid she doesn't have a choice. The man pulled his weapon. Everything happened very fast after that. Elena moved first, drawing her own gun and firing in one smooth motion. One of the men went down. Marta grabbed Isabella and pushed her toward the wall, using her body as a shield. More shots, screaming from somewhere inside the palazzo. Isabella couldn't see what was happening. She could only hear it, the crack of gunfire, the thud of bodies, the sharp commands being shouted in Italian. Then Marta made a sound Isabella had never heard before. A wet, choked gasp, and collapsed against her. Marta! Blood. So much blood. Isabella caught her bodyguard before she hit the ground, feeling the warmth soak through her uniform. Run, Marta whispered. The garden. There's a gate. I'm not leaving you. Run. A hand grabbed Isabella's hair and yanked her backward. She screamed. The man from before, the one who had spoken, was standing over her, his face spattered with something dark. Enough of this, he said. You're coming with us, and if you fight, you die. It's that simple. Isabella stopped fighting. They threw her into a van that smelled like motor oil and fear. Her hands were zip-tied behind her back. A hood was pulled over her head. She couldn't see anything. She could hear men speaking in rapid Italian, voices tense with adrenaline. She could hear a phone conversation. We have her. Moving to the secondary location now. She could hear her own heartbeat, so loud it drowned out everything else. Sofia Marchetti. They found her body in the Tiber. Isabella was going to die. She was going to die because she had been too stubborn to say yes. Because she had wanted to choose her own life. Because she had thought she could have safety and independence at the same time. She should have said yes. She should have taken the ring. She should have. The van stopped. Doors opened. Hands grabbed her and pulled her out. The hood came off. She was in a warehouse. Industrial. Abandoned. The kind of place people went to disappear forever. There were men everywhere. 15, maybe 20. All armed. All watching her with expressions that ranged from boredom to interest. And standing in front of her, smiling like they were old friends, was Enzo Cavalli. Isabella, he said. So nice to see you again. What do you want? What everyone wants when they take something valuable. He moved closer. Leverage. Against Marciano. Against Don Tatti, yes. You see, we've been trying to get to him for years. Decades, really. Our families have been at war since before either of us was born. But Marciano is careful. Controlled. He doesn't have weaknesses. Enzo's smile widened. Until you. Isabella's stomach turned. He won't negotiate for me. Won't he? We're not together. I turned him down. He proposed and I said no. Something flickered in Enzo's expression. Surprise, maybe. or calculation. You said no to Marciano Taddy? Yes. Why? Because I'm not stupid. Because I know what happens to women who get too close to him. She lifted her chin, channeling every ounce of defiance she had left. Because Sofia Marchetti's body was found in the river and I didn't want to end up the same way. Enzo laughed. It wasn't a nice sound. Sofia Marchetti, he repeated. Yes, that was unfortunate. But necessary. Necessary? She was gathering information on Marciano, starting to piece things together. The legitimate businesses, the illegal ones, the bodies buried in between. She was going to go to the police. Isabella's blood ran cold. She wasn't just an innocent victim. No one is innocent in this world. Isabella. Sofia thought she could play both sides. She thought she could love a monster while building a case against him. Enzo shrugged. She was wrong. So you killed her. We removed a threat. There's a difference. And now you're going to remove me? That depends entirely on Marciano. Enzo pulled out his phone and began typing. We're going to send him a message. A photograph, actually. You, looking appropriately frightened, with a very clear deadline attached. What deadline? 48 hours. He transfers control of his port operations to us, and you go free. He refuses and... Enzo made a gesture that didn't need translation. He won't do it. You underestimate how obsessed he is with you. I'm not. The man attended 15 charity events in 6 weeks just to see you serve champagne. He proposed marriage after knowing you for a month. He's been maintaining 24-hour surveillance on your apartment since the night you rejected him. Enzo's smile turned cold. That's not ordinary interest, Isabella. That's obsession. And obsession makes people do stupid things. He raised his phone, snapped a photograph. Smile, he said. You're about to become the most expensive woman in Rome. The hours that followed were the longest of Isabella's life. They moved her from the warehouse to a different location. A villa somewhere in the countryside, surrounded by guards and cameras and the kind of silence that meant no one would hear her scream. They gave her food she didn't eat, water she barely drank, a small room with a locked door and a window that looked out onto nothing but darkness. She thought about her mother. She thought about Julia. She thought about Marciano. She thought about all the choices that had led her to this moment, the choices she had made and the choices that had been made for her. She thought about saying yes. If she had said yes, she would be in his villa right now, protected, safe, perhaps unhappy, perhaps not, but alive. Instead, she was here, waiting to find out if obsession was stronger than strategy, waiting to find out if she was worth dying for. The answer came at dawn. Isabella was dozing fitfully when the sound of gunfire woke her. Not distant gunfire, not contained gunfire, everywhere gunfire. She scrambled to the corner of her room, pressing her back against the wall, listening as the villa erupted into chaos. Shouting, screaming, explosions that shook the floor beneath her feet. Then silence, terrible, absolute silence. The door to her room opened. Marciano Taddy stood in the doorway, covered in blood and dust and something that looked like ash. His suit was destroyed. His face was scratched. One of his sleeves had been torn away entirely, revealing the full extent of the serpent tattoo wrapped around his forearm. His eyes found hers and went bright with something she couldn't name. Isabella. She was across the room before she knew she was moving. He caught her, held her, crushed her against his chest so tightly she could barely breathe. You came, she whispered. Of course I came. They said you wouldn't negotiate. I didn't negotiate. His voice was rough. I don't negotiate. I take what's mine. She pulled back just enough to look at his face. You killed them. It wasn't a question. Enzo Cavalli escaped. The rest. He shook his head. The rest aren't a concern anymore. How many? Does it matter? Yes. He was quiet for a moment. Then, 17. 17 men. He had killed 17 men to get her back. She should have been horrified. She should have been disgusted. Instead, she looked at the blood on his hands, blood he had spilled for her, and she felt something shift inside her chest. Something permanent. I love you, she said. His whole body went still. What? I love you. I think I've loved you since the Venturi Gala. Since you looked at me like I was something real. Isabella, I know what you are. I know what you've done. I know what you'll do in the future. And I love you anyway. He made a sound, half laugh, half sob, and kissed her. This kiss was different from the one in the courtyard. This one was desperate, raw, full of everything they had almost lost and everything they were too afraid to say out loud. When they finally broke apart, both of them breathing hard, Marciano pressed his forehead against hers. Marry me, he said. That sounds more like an order than a question. It's both. You're covered in blood. I'm aware. There are probably bodies downstairs. There are definitely bodies downstairs. And you want to propose again? I want to propose every day until you say yes. His voice dropped. I will keep asking, Isabella. For the rest of my life if I have to. I will keep asking until you understand that I am not offering you a cage. I am offering you a throne. She touched his face. His eyes fluttered closed. Ask me properly, she said. His eyes opened. Something like hope flickered in their depths. He reached into his pocket, the same ring, and pulled out the velvet box. This time, when he opened it, the diamond caught the first light of dawn through the window. Isabella Terenzi, he said quietly. Will you marry me? She looked at the ring. She looked at the man. She looked at the future that terrified her and exhilarated her and promised her nothing except that it would never, ever be boring. Yes, she said. He slid the ring onto her finger. The fit was perfect. The next months passed in a blur of changes. Marciano brought her into his world slowly, carefully, with a patience she hadn't expected from a man who had killed 17 people to save her. He introduced her to his business associates, the legitimate ones first, then gradually the others. He showed her his properties, his operations, his empire. He showed her the parts of himself he had kept hidden from everyone. The nightmares that woke him at 3 in the morning. The guilt he carried for his brother's death. The loneliness that had been his constant companion since before he could remember. And Isabella showed him the parts of herself she had kept hidden too. The fear that she wasn't enough. The grief she still carried for her mother. The way she had spent her whole life taking care of everyone else because she didn't know how to let anyone take care of her. They learned each other. They fought sometimes. He was controlling, she was stubborn, and neither of them knew how to compromise without feeling like they were losing. But they always found their way back to each other. Always ended up tangled together in the dark, breathing each other's names like prayers. Julia finished her medical degree at a university in Switzerland, fully funded by sources she didn't ask about. She came home for the wedding. The wedding itself was an event that Rome would talk about for decades. Every powerful family was invited, including what remained of the Cavallis, who attended out of obligation and fear. The ceremony took place in a cathedral that had hosted royal weddings for 400 years. Isabella wore a dress that had been designed specifically for her, simple and elegant and nothing like what a Mafia bride was supposed to wear. She was beautiful. Marciano cried. He didn't try to hide it. After the ceremony, after the reception, after they had danced and laughed and kissed in front of everyone who mattered, they finally found themselves alone. Their bedroom was in the Tatti family villa, the same villa where Isabella had once confronted him about Sofia Marchetti. But it looked different now. Softer, There were flowers on the nightstand and books on the shelves and photographs of the two of them scattered across every surface. It looked like a home. Marciano closed the door behind them and stood there for a moment, just looking at her. "You're my wife," he said, like he couldn't quite believe it. "I am. You actually married me." "I did. Even after everything." She crossed the room and placed her hands on his chest. The tattoos on his neck were visible above his collar. The Italian script she could read now. "Death is a promise. Especially after everything," she said. He kissed her then, slowly, thoroughly, with all the time in the world. The night that followed was everything and nothing like she had imagined. She had expected intensity. She got tenderness. She had expected possession. She got reverence. He touched her like she was sacred, like she was precious, like he couldn't quite believe she was real and he was terrified she might disappear. When they finally came together, it felt like the end of one story and the beginning of another. Felt like coming home. Afterward, they lay tangled in sheets that cost more than her old apartment, her head on his chest, his fingers tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. "I have a wedding present for you," he said. "You've already given me too much. This one is different." He reached over to the nightstand and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "What is it?" she asked. "Read it." She unfolded the paper. It was a legal document, dense with legal language she didn't fully understand. But certain phrases jumped out at her. Transfer of assets, joint ownership, equal partnership. "Marciano, everything I have is now half yours," he said quietly. "Not because you're my wife, because you're my partner. If I die tomorrow, you inherit control of everything. The business, the properties, the money, all of it. I don't want your money. I know, but you'll have it anyway." He turned her face toward his. "I told you I wasn't offering you a cage. I was offering you a throne. Now you have the power to prove me right." Tears were streaming down her face. She didn't try to stop them. "I love you," she whispered. "I know. No, I love you. I love you so much it scares me." "Good." He kissed her forehead. "I want you a little scared. It means you're paying attention." She laughed through her tears. "You're impossible. I'm yours." The years that followed were not easy. Enemies tested them. Allies betrayed them. The world tried, over and over, to tear them apart. The Cavallis made another attempt on Isabella's life 2 years into the marriage. Failed. Enzo Cavalli was found dead 3 days later. His body displayed in a way that sent a very clear message to anyone else who might consider similar actions. Isabella never asked for details. She learned not to. Instead, she focused on the parts of their life that she could control. She established a foundation for working-class women in Rome, providing scholarships and job training and the kind of support she had desperately needed as a young waitress. She became a fixture in Roman society, not as a trophy wife, but as a power in her own right. People who had once looked down on her began to fear her. It was, she discovered, a better feeling than she had expected. Marciano, for his part, slowly began shifting his operations toward legitimacy. It was a long process, generational, really, but he started it anyway. For her. For the children they both knew they wanted eventually. For the future. They fought about that too. About how much was enough. About how clean his hands could ever really become. About whether it was possible to build something good on a foundation of blood and violence. They never resolved those arguments, but they kept having them, and that, Isabella decided, was what mattered. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Marciano took her back to the Palazzo Venturi, the same venue where they had first locked eyes across a crowded room. The gala that night was in their honor. Isabella wore gold, a deliberate choice, a reference to the socialite who had been so sure she would win Marciano's attention all those years ago. The dress was simple and elegant, but the statement was unmistakable. She had won. Marciano stood beside her in a perfectly tailored black suit, his tattoos visible as always, his presence commanding the room as it always did. But his eyes were only on her. "Happy anniversary," he murmured. "Happy anniversary. Do you remember the first time we stood in this room? I nearly dropped a tray of champagne. You nearly gave me a heart attack." She smiled. "I was just a waitress. You were never just anything." The orchestra began to play. He offered her his hand. "Dance with me. Do I have a choice?" "You always have a choice." His eyes held hers. "That's what makes it matter when you choose me." She took his hand. They danced. Around them, Rome's elite watched and whispered and wondered how a waitress had become a queen. They speculated about their relationship, about their power, about the rumors that swirled around them like smoke. Isabella heard none of it. She was too busy looking at her husband, at the man who had seen her when no one else had, at the man who had burned the world down to keep her safe, at the man who loved her, obsessively, possessively, completely, and had spent every day of their marriage proving it. "I have something to tell you," she said. His brow furrowed. "What?" "I'm pregnant." The music kept playing. The dancers kept dancing. But Marciano Tatti, the most feared man in Rome, went absolutely still. "What did you say?" "I'm pregnant. 8 weeks." She smiled at his expression. "You're going to be a father." For a long moment he didn't speak. Then his arms tightened around her, pulling her close, and she felt moisture against her hair. He was crying. Again. "I love you," he whispered. "I love you. I love you. I love you. I know. I'm going to be a father. You are. Our child. We'll be safe. We'll be loved. We'll have everything we never had. We'll have us. Yes." She pulled back to look at his face, at the tears streaming down cheeks that were usually so controlled. "We'll have us." He kissed her then, in the middle of the dance floor, in front of everyone who mattered. And Isabella Terenzi Tatti, once a waitress, now a wife, soon a mother, kissed him back. The orchestra played on. Rome watched. And somewhere, in a future neither of them could quite imagine yet, a child waited to be born into a world of darkness and light, violence and love, danger and safety. A world that would be better because of the woman who had refused to be intimidated, and the man who had loved her for it. 7 months later, their daughter was born. They named her Lucia Light because that's what she was. From her first breath, she lit up every room she entered. She had her mother's eyes and her father's stubbornness, and she wrapped Don Marciano Tatti around her tiny finger within seconds of being placed in his arms. He held her like she was made of glass, like she was the most precious thing he had ever touched, like she was everything he had never known he wanted until he had it. "She's perfect," he breathed. Isabella, exhausted and exhilarated and overwhelmed with love, could only nod. "She's ours. She's ours." He looked up at her then, his wife, the mother of his child, the woman who had walked into a gala 6 years ago and changed everything. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For choosing me, for seeing me, for giving me." He looked back at Lucia. "This. You gave me this too." "No. I gave you danger and uncertainty and a life you never asked for. You gave me everything else." She reached for his hand. He gave it. "We gave each other everything," she corrected quietly. "That's what partnership means." He smiled, the real smile, the rare one, the one she had fallen in love with in a courtyard surrounded by jasmine. "Partners," he agreed. Outside the hospital room, Rome continued its endless dance of power and politics and petty rivalries. Enemies plotted. Allies schemed. The underworld churned on, indifferent to the miracle happening behind these walls. But inside this room, There was only silence, only peace, only a man, a woman, and a child who represented everything they had fought for, everything they had survived, everything they had chosen. Marciano pressed a kiss to Lucia's forehead, then to Isabella's. "Let's go home," he said. Home. Such a simple word for such a complicated concept. But Isabella looked at her husband, looked at her daughter, looked at the life she had built from nothing but courage and stubbornness and a refusal to be invisible. And she smiled. "Yes," she said, "let's go home." 10 years later, Isabella stood on the terrace of the Tatti Villa, watching the sun set over Rome. The city spread out before her like a tapestry of light and shadow, its ancient streets holding secrets she now understood. She had learned this city in ways she never expected. Its power structures, its hidden passages, its thousand small cruelties and kindnesses. She had become part of it. Behind her, she could hear Lucia practicing piano, badly, but with enthusiasm. Further inside the villa, Marciano was on a call with someone important. His voice the low rumble of command that still made her pulse quicken after all these years. They had 2 more children now. Marco, who was 7 and had his father's intensity. Sophia, who was 4 and had been named deliberately, a redemption of sorts. Life had not been easy, but life had been good. Footsteps behind her, arms wrapping around her waist, lips against her neck. "What are you thinking about?" Marciano murmured. "The Venturi Gala. That was a lifetime ago. Sometimes it feels like yesterday." He turned her to face him. His hair was touched with gray now, distinguished rather than diminished. The tattoos were still there, the death promise on his neck, the serpent on his forearm, the symbols on his knuckles that marked him as who he was. But his eyes were different, warmer, softer, full of something that looked like peace. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. "Regret what?" "Saying yes, choosing this life, choosing me." She considered the question. She thought about the danger she had faced, the enemies she had made, the compromises she had learned to live with, the blood that would never fully wash off their hands. She thought about her children, safe and loved and fierce, about her sister, now a successful surgeon in Milan, about the foundation that had helped thousands of women escape the same poverty she had known, about the home she had built in the ashes of someone else's empire. She thought about the man in front of her, who had seen her when no one else had, who had chosen her when he could have had anyone, who had loved her, obsessively and completely, every single day of their life together. "No," she said, "I don't regret anything. Not even the difficult parts? Especially not the difficult parts. They made us who we are." He kissed her then, slowly, sweetly, with all the time in the world. When they parted, he rested his forehead against hers. "I love you, Isabella Tatti. I know. You've told me every day for 10 years. And I'll tell you every day for the next 50. Bold of you to assume you'll live that long." He laughed. That low, unexpected sound that still transformed his face entirely. "With you by my side, I'll live forever just to spite anyone who tries to take me away from you." She smiled. Behind them, the piano music stopped. "Mama! Papa!" Lucia's voice echoed through the villa. "Dinner is ready." Marciano offered Isabella his hand. She took it. Together, they walked back into their home, into the chaos of children and noise and life that filled every corner, into the future they had built together, into forever. The end came, as endings often do, on an ordinary night. They were old by then, genuinely old, their children grown, their grandchildren numerous, their legacy secure. Marciano had long since handed control of the family to Marco, who ran it with the same fierce intelligence his father had shown. Isabella's foundation had become one of the largest charitable organizations in Italy. They had done good, Not enough to balance the scales, maybe, but enough. On this night, they lay together in the same bed they had shared for 53 years. The villa was quiet. The children had visited that afternoon, bringing flowers and grandchildren and noise. Now there was only silence, only peace. Isabella. Marciano's voice was weak, but still his. I'm here. I know. His hand found hers. The knuckle tattoos had faded over the decades, but they were still there, still marking him as who he was. I want you to know something. What? That night at the Venturi Gala, when I saw you for the first time, I knew. Knew what? That you were going to save me. His breath rattled. I didn't know how. I didn't know why. But I knew that you were going to be the thing that made my life worth living. Tears streamed down her wrinkled cheeks. You saved yourself, she whispered. I just loved you while you did it. Same thing. She laughed through her tears. He smiled. And then, quietly, peacefully, with his hand in hers and her love surrounding him, Don Marciano Tatti closed his eyes for the last time. Isabella held him until his body went cold. Then she lay down beside him, her head on his chest, and waited. She didn't wait long. The maid found them the next morning, still tangled together, still holding hands, their faces peaceful in death as they had been turbulent in life. Rome mourned. The world moved on. But the story, the impossible, improbable, beautiful story of a mafia boss and a waitress who loved each other against all odds, lived on. In their children, in their grandchildren, in the foundation that bore her name, in every person who heard the tale and thought, maybe love really can conquer everything. Maybe obsession and tenderness aren't opposites. Maybe power and partnership can coexist. Maybe, just maybe, the most dangerous man in the room can be undone by the simplest, most honest woman in it. Because that's the truth of their story. Not that he chose her, but that she chose him back. And in them could have been alone. They became forever. The end.